This is I Am Accused of Tending to the Past by Lucille Clifton. I am accused of tending to the past as if I made it, as if I sculpted it with my own hands. I did not. The past was waiting for me when I came, a monstrous, unnamed baby, and I, with my mother's itch, took it to my breast and named it history. She is more human now, learning languages every day, remembering faces, names, and dates. When she is strong enough to travel on her own, beware, she will.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and thanks to Sanctuary for being a sanctuary, being a place that is bringing us back together in whatever way we can be together. It's been an inspiration so far. Here we are at a time designated as Black History Month. It's a time when all Americans are asked to look at the too often ignored accomplishments of Black people in this country. At times when, even amongst Black people, this month is looked upon with a little bit of derision and more than a little eye-rolling. Because many Blacks do so because having this observation take place during February, the shortest month of the year, is seen as a further slight to the accomplishments of Black people. And many whites roll their eyes because they see it as a problem that they should ever have to learn anything about anyone who doesn't look like them. Many say, Black history, white history, it's all American history. This is akin to many people saying all lives matter. But we know that all lives don't matter to all people, and that history is a subject that many Americans hate. This country loves nostalgia. It loves remembering things exactly the way we would wish we have had them happen. What we hate is history. History indicts. History, as Konrad Adenauer tells us, is the sum total of all mistakes we could have avoided, but didn't. During this month, I have been thinking about and wrestling with the ideas of sanctuary that I look at in what is called cultural capital and resistance. By these, I mean what each of us have been bequeathed from the cultures we've come up in that we can use as a sort of currency to build on. And what in those cultures has been sources of real strength that might help a people survive and thrive. This is especially important in a culture built on being antithetical to human existence. I mean, we are actually talking about this place in which we live, which was founded upon the destruction of one people, the enslavement of another, and the systematic disenfranchisement of poor people and women. When you start off that way, it's kind of hard to get right unless you do some self-reflection. Now, part of this strength comes from the power of personal story, as well as that of a people, the story of your people, your tribe, those closest to you that need you to survive. And so much of our personal history is shaped by history. As Lucille Clifton wrote in the poem that was read, history is sculpted and waiting for us when we come, that it is developing language, remembering faces, names, and dates. This week, some of the other officers that were with Officer Derek Chauvin when he killed George Floyd are going to trial. And of course, for those of us who remember all of the pain and anguish around how George Floyd died begin to stir again. And the poet in me, ever in search of connections and patterns, couldn't help but find the parallel in the story of another who was brutalized and subdued by a callous policing authority. One who with immobilized hands died at the hands of state-sanctioned violence in front of a screaming crowd as he called out to a parent and then breathed his last. One whose death became a catalyst for a movement that shaped and went beyond the parochial locale in which the death occurred to spark a broader movement. Now, it would be difficult for us to miss this Christological illusion in the comparison. The story of Christ and Christianity has been handed down to black people in America by black people in America for hundreds of years. I was raised a Christian. Half of my family was Baptist, the other half was Pentecostal. We basically called it Sunday morning disco. You got the spirit depending upon how good the bass line was and whether or not people clapped on time. So being raised in that tradition runs deep on both sides of my family. However, most black Americans came to Christianity through the lash, through being beaten and tortured and terrorized into it. And so this religion, this Stockholming, passed on from generation to generation until it became culture. When does our trauma become culture? And even though I am what my family has called a DNA, damn near atheist, I find myself taken by gospel music, spirited away by the voice of Mahalia Jackson, lifted up by how it finds its way into my viscera in spite of my rational, intellectual, and mildly educated protestations. Nathan and Sharon, who is remote, if you could play that video right now of Mahalia Jackson singing at the March on Washington, that would be great. And if we would listen, I want you to hear in that voice what brings me back to it. Now, even though I am currently a devout, committed non-believer, and again, as I said, I can no longer place faith in a religion that Stockholmed my ancestors, even still, the culture that was built is, for me and millions of Americans who look like me, a sanctuary. It is a source of cultural capital and resistance. I named my message today after this song, How We Got Over, Black Breath, Black Voice, Black Survival. It's a theme that at this time in American history is extremely resonant for me. A few years ago came the release of the 1619 Project. It detailed African American history and enslavement at the beginning of this country. Essentially, to me, the 1619 Project is a chronicle, a celebration of the fact that black people have survived and still continue to do so and to fight. It helps to draw parallels between oppressions of the past and those of the present day. For instance, last year we observed the centenary of the aerial bombing of a black section of Tulsa, Oklahoma. A bombing initiated and supported by whites threatened by the economic success of black people in that area, because along with economic success often comes political success. Now, those at the time saw that as a threat to their current power. Today, we are witnessing the fact that so many black voters were instrumental in successfully electing Joe Biden as president of the United States. We see again how white civic anger is rising to attack black voting rights, which is an attack on black civic survival. And it goes on. Now, of course, we know the people that I speak of are not representative of all white people. We know this. However, it seems to be representative of enough of the population in power to effectively threaten black political survival. And unfortunately, too few whites lift a hand to halt its effects. My own father-in-law, a white man who I love dearly, gets visibly agitated and dismissive and refuses to even listen when anybody mentions institutional racism. In spite of the fact that I am his son-in-law, been married to his daughter for 21 years, in spite of the fact that I have given him the only 2 biological grandchildren he is ever going to get, and they see themselves as black, in spite of the fact that his daughter, a well-trained educator, has shown him fact after example after fact after example, and despite the fact that he can't even really tell you what institutional racism is, he refuses to readily acknowledge his blindness or how his politics, mindset, and news choices are contributing to this blindness. Now, I know that if this exists in my family, I know it exists in yours. So how have African Americans survived? Well, let's tell it like it is. How have black people survived white people? That's really what we're talking about here. How have we managed to survive and resist and continue to persist in the face of white ignorance, arrogance, stupidity, hypocrisy, and brutality? It ain't been easy. Some years ago, I got to work with the Handel Haydn Society to create a multi-part text exploring black music and voice and its role in black survival. I began with the middle passage, the longest stretch of the transatlantic trading of enslaved Africans, those who became my ancestors. It was a difficult task. Difficult. Had to travel that path from heart to head to hands, find out what hit me and dive back into the pain of it, go into my brain and research it, and then find the way to shape it into something that was going to give structure to that painful history. So I'm going to present to you 2 of the 4 sections. As you listen to it, I want you to try and imagine, if you can, what it would be like to be in the cramped hold of a cargo ship, chained to someone, chained to someone, chained to someone, chained to someone, in complete darkness. Visualize that. Now, as you do so, imagine what it would have meant for you to hear a single human voice in that darkness, refusing to give in and break into song. The ship, the darkness, the voice, the slave name, the ship, the wanderer, the Clotilde, the wildfire, the nightingale, the mother of God. The ship came like empty belly. The ship came like a fist in the water. Its sails white knives in the wind. Its keel like a cutlass on the wave. The ship was a hard hand chopping a chart through the ocean. The ship was a galley trailed by sharks. Both the ship and the sharks learned to grow fat on the human. The ship was a dance of dysentery. The ship was a cathedral of African bleed. The ship churched the wine dark brine toward the scarred cross of a new country. And deep in the rank and the rot of the ship were the voices. And the voices quivered through blood-battered mouths in lamentations so ancient they had no names. And the voices became the pitch and roll of water purpled by bloodstorm, became the sound of bloody water storming against the hull of the ship. The voices became the rattle and chain and shackle masticating flesh. The voices were the child's cry, the child crying as she was ripped from the mother's breasts. The voice were mother's breasts weeping with milk without meaning. The voices were suffocation, breathing denied by the human-made miasmic darkness deep in the rank and the rot of the ship. Yet the voices called out into that darkness, called above the aches and the rapes and the whip cracks, called above the stains and the pains and the lashed backs, and the voices began to tremble toward one another. And then all the trembling voices gathered into one voice made of many voices, and the darkness trembled. And the darkness began to be beaten back. And the new-born voices made of many voices felt itself growing, felt itself strengthening. And then it felt the darkness shrinking. The troubadour, the salamander, the tekora, the desire, the Jesus. And as the darkness shrank, more voices joined the voice, began to unite and fight against the shrinking darkness. And the voice grew many voices strong. But the darkness was ever present, ever watchful. And like any living thing, it too wished to preserve its existence. So the darkness gathered darkness unto itself, began to thrash, began to rally, began to snarl, began to surge, began rising like flood water. And the voice that was many voices strong began to drown in the flooding darkness. But then the scarred cross began to rise, began to weave its way into the voice, began to strengthen and buoy the voice, to hold the voice up like driftwood, so that the voice could cling to against the raging inundations of the darkness. The scarred cross, the meeting place of forsake and salvation, the intersected space of earth dust and heaven hope, the stitching together of ancient way and new faith. And this voice, this faith, stirred a familiar strangeness into the voice, like a long-held longing, newly remembered and moaned in another tongue. And this moan was the sweet weep and wonder well of the world-weary heart. This moan became the hum and holler of the holy ghostly hymn haunting the enslaved soul. And this too became the voice. And the voice began singing so sweetly of salvation that the voice itself became salvation. Yes, the African American voice has held up black people beyond hurt, held us up beyond pain, buoyed us. It was a driftwood in a storm that we could cling to, whether it came from the mouths of the preacher, the teacher, the singer, the rapper, the poet. And yet do I wonder at this marvelous thing to make a poet black and bid him sing. Black voices for centuries have been giving black people strength, and not a few white people. Black voices for centuries have been giving black people strength, very often in coded messages and songs like "Follow the Drinking Gourd" or "Wade in the Water, 'cause God's gonna trouble the water." Found ways to pass on messages of hope to each other, even as the enslaver listened. And in addition to this clandestine encouragement, there was also the direct and unobscured voice, this advice that we passed on to each other and continue to do so. Some of you might be familiar with the tradition called the talk. In much of white America, this is often thought as the birds and the bees, or how babies got made. For many African Americans, we never have had to have that talk. Given the close quarters of the enslaved, and that any black woman could become subject to the lust of any white man, a major reason there are so many shades of African Americans. Many African American communities saw little need to pass on this information. Some of you who are my closer friends, I may have pointed out to you in another discussion of the results of my genetic testing. Well, what I found out is that I have almost 8% English, Irish, Scottish DNA. Apparently, it found its way into my genome, my genetic makeup, between 1720 and 1750. Given that time in American history, I strongly suspect it was not invited there. It was forced. I am a product of rape. There is a reason that I, as a black man, have the last name Gibson. And why, as I said, so many African Americans have European last names and such a wide variance of skin color. This is history indicting us. No, for us to talk, or rather the series of ongoing talks we African Americans have, usually from father to son, is about how to increase their chances of black survival in a world that hates black breath. In other words, instructions on how to survive white people. How to not be seen as threat. Because any white person out there could accuse you of something and the society would tend to believe them over you, and many whites know this, and many will use that power to gain control in a situation, as many might have seen with Amy Cooper in the Central Park incident. Well, my grandfather had this talk with my father. My father had this talk with me and my brother Ron. I have had this talk with both my sons, Jordan and McKenna. And I've had this talk with a number of black young men who are in need of it. One young man asked if I could consider writing it down and placing it in poetic form. I did. After that, several dozen young men and women asked for a copy. Then I began to think about what other advice might be being passed on from other black men when they have had these talks with younger black men. So I called up some friends and asked what advice they were passing on to their sons and their nephews and their students. Then I began asking the same question of other black men who I'd interacted with, my barber, repairmen, other poets, transit workers, even policemen. And so much of what I was told were just variations of what my dad had passed on to me. It was just mixed with their own strategies of survival, some of which made its way into the final text that I gave my sons and have passed along to others. Often when I write something that means something dear to me, I read it to my wife. I value her opinion. I wish to know her thoughts. She is used to that. However, though she knew what I was writing, she noticed I had not shared this piece with her. So she sheepishly asked if she could hear it. I was shocked. Not at her asking. Kind of. But I had never considered that I should tell her, a white woman, what I tell our black children about how to survive people who look like her. See, where I come from, there's a general understanding amongst black people that there are things you don't tell white folks. Black people's business is none of theirs, and trusting the wrong white person, wrong being the average white person, with knowledge of anything about us could compromise black survival. You don't do it. So I really had to think hard about whether to let her in on it. Now, given that this is my wife I'm talking about, you can understand how this reluctance carries with it a country of countless complications. And I've been slowly walking through those. However, I eventually decided that this white mother of black sons needed to know what they were up against. So I shared the piece with her, and the reason for my initial reluctance to do so. We are both still walking through that. And after I did, she said, "Babe, you need to let white people hear this." And I went, "No way. Forget it." But as we talked, I became slowly hopeful that more good might come out of this for white people than harm for black people. Even though when I shared it with my father-in-law, when he heard me perform it, he walks away. If this is happening in my family, it's happening in yours. So as you hear this piece, I want you again to use your imagination. Imagine a father telling his son these words, and then ask yourself, how much of this were you told as a kid? Was your brother told this? Your nephew? Your cousins? How much of this have you, if you have children, have had to tell them this? Were you ever told anything like this as a child? And if your answer to any of those is no, you have not, then be human enough to ask yourself, why not? From old heads to young bloods, advice from black men to those who will be. Hey there, black boy. I just want to talk to you. Let you know I understand the things that you're going through. See, I was a black boy. I grew up in this country too. Yeah, now I got gray hair. Guess I learned a thing or two. Like how to not get taken when they try and take you out. Like how to not get bitten when you're in the lion's mouth. Like how to beat a system bent on beating up your life. How to not get sniped. How to dance in the rifle sights. You see, there are red dots all around you. Yeah. They aiming for your head, kid, because when you were born, that's the first thing they messed with, and they're going to keep on coming at you to attack and hack into your mental till it's lentil-sized, brutalized by lies about your potential. I know you can hear it. Vague and atmospherically telling you those messages of you won't be nothing but some kind of thug, son. Poverty in prison is going to be your only option. I know you feel how hard they make it for you to get educated, so you stay underfed and underrated until you become a fist that's fated to be incarcerated. Yeah. That's the game. And they're just playing enough of me around, giving you the skinny on how this business is going down. Admittedly, too many of us older heads have stepped to you like you're our rivals, but lately, I've been really concerned, deathly concerned with your survival, because I know if it weren't for the grace of older heads looking out for me, I wouldn't be here to tell any of you young bloods anything. So I just ask you, listen to what it is I've come to say. Take the best of what makes sense to you and throw the rest of it away. First, get the dictionary. Wrestle with those words and learn to use your oppressor's language even better than they can. Why? Because in the language lies all the oppressor's truths and lies, and learning how they twist them together might better help you to survive. Then practice 4 distinct categories of speech. 1 for the courthouse, 1 for the streets, 1 for the classroom, 1 with your peeps. And know that folks in authority are going to judge you by the way that you speak. They'll judge how often you swear, judge the cut of your hair, how you slouch in your chair, judge how often they scare of the color we share, or the truth you declare, of the swagger you dare, the bling and clothes that you wear. So refuse to wear any brand name across your chest unless that brand has done something for this world that's worthy of respect. Because to present your body branded with somebody else's name is the very essence of what it would have been for you to have been enslaved. Go get a hand drum and get to drumming, son. Why? Because the drum is what the oppressors took away from your ancestors to separate you from Africa, make you act more Western, and keep them from communicating messages of freedom and escaping. And if you're like me, you'll find that when you drum, you might find that when you close your eyes and hands strike skin and you hear that boom bap, boom bap, boom bap, boom bap, you get just a little bit of Africa back. Never forget the reality of what it means to be a man who's black. It means 4 heads like yours bobbing inside of 1 car will eventually equal 1 guaranteed pullover by 2 racist cops. Especially if you got 1 hip-hop album on blast. Yes, it's racist mathematics, but you need to learn this math. And when you do get pulled over, and you will, remain still and keep both your hands visible. And when they try to enrage you, threaten to engage you, and they will, remain chill, cool, calm, and sensible. And know that some of your friends who ain't black like you may never understand what it is you're going through. And some others will not give a damn what it is you're going through. So you must be careful which white folks and others you let know what's killing you. See, too many see everything as a zero-sum game and gain a sick sense of superiority in their profit and your loss, and would rather see you grope without hope than pay what equality of opportunity costs. See, some would rather see you hurting than as a full person. And if you die in destitution or by clop, 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 getting shot by a cop, some will just justify it, rationalize it, and say, you deserved it. And not just some white people, but some who are white adjacent. You'll find the same attitude among some immigrants, some Latinx, some Indians, some Asians who've accepted that seeking their American dream means learning to snore through your historic American screams, that acknowledging them might compromise their achieving things, keep them from receiving things that they've been told are worth having, like a chance at grabbing that American brass ring. So to prove who they're loyal to, some will do almost anything, like lend their voices to the racist chorus and sing, like look at your head, pick up a stone, weigh its weight, and then fling, increasing your historic pain and unearned suffering, ignoring how much of your physical and mental maiming and murder it brings. This is the truth, kid. It is. Yet, in spite of it, when you go through life, you absolutely must get everyone you first meet, give them complete respect, but reserve trust. Respect is something you give anyone just for being. Trust you reserve until there is a good reason. And if there isn't one, leave them alone, son. Never be afraid to remain on your own, son. And no matter how much pressure this world puts on, son, there is something to that cliche about how pressure creates diamonds. And though you got your flaws, you keep shining. Dig deep for your gifts. Challenge yourself and others, and you'll find them. And whatever you choose to pursue, strive to be excellent. For while this world plows a path that allows for the worst of white males to become president, it makes absolutely no place for mediocre black men. And sometimes you're going to flail and feel like crying. Sometimes you're going to fail, want to lay down and start dying. And when that happens, remember what the mother said to her son. Life ain't been no crystal stair. But you got to keep on climbing. Black boy, you fight back twice as hard. Duck and dodge. Keep up your guard. Keep a lifted voice, a lifted vision, and a compassionate heart. Take every opportunity to learn, listen, study, and grow not just book smart, but life wise. Black boy, rise and sing in the dead of night. Take those broken wings you've got and learn to take flight. Take those tear-shrunken eyes of yours and learn to see. Know how much was given for you to be free. Know you are the result of your ancestors sacrificing and bleeding. Though you will never know their faces. Know you are what they prayed for, the answer to their pleading. Black boy, keep growing, keep learning, keep your mind turning, keep your fire burning, keep believing. You want to beat the game, black boy. Black boy. Keep breathing. Keep breathing. Keep breathing. Yes. We keep breathing, even though the air is foul. We keep voicing, even when the hand chokes the voice. We keep surviving because we keep believing that this country will be better. We'll live up to its promises and become that more perfect union. We've seen it. We've glimpsed it. Will it live up to its promises? Will it become a place where all can live up to their potential? A place that King hoped would be one where justice would rain down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream? Guess that depends on what we do now. Until then, black people, though sick and tired of being sick and tired, will, as we say, keep on keeping on. Keep on consoling one another through music. Keep on passing advice from the front lines. Keep on getting out of the way of the worst instincts of white people. And keep on surviving. Keep on finding ways to ensure black breath, black voice, and black survival. And as we say in African American culture, now, what y'all gonna do?